From undesirable to undeniable, the Canoptek Reanimator, one of the most disappointing units in ninth edition as far as an early release is concerned, becomes one of the best, almost an auto-include in every Necron army going into 10th edition. And that's what we're here to talk about. Welcome back, all my 40k fanatics out there. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation to bring you another video for all my cronies out there. And today it is the last of the Canoptek units I'm going to be reviewing before my matchup with Lane, where I take the revived Canoptek Harvest, the new Canoptek Harvest, the improved Canoptek Harvest, depending on which one you look at. I did a all-out Cryptek Canoptek list that didn't do too well, but then I had my tournament-based Canoptek Harvest, the true Canoptek Harvest, that fared well until I ran into Imperial Guard. That banner will plague my nightmares forever. Regardless, guys, if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do turn on the bell for notification, get notified on all the content that we bring you here on the channel, including the list summary and battle report that my Canoptek Harvest will be facing off against Lane later this week. Also later this week, I'm going to be going and doing the Forge World review. I had a few requests to bring the Canoptek units from Forge World into this list, into this discussion, and unfortunately I don't actually have any of them. The centipedes are rather expensive, and even in the column of 3D printing, I haven't seen anything that's like a good alternative. You know, I'm definitely, if you can find some cool stuff to replace, I have a couple of alternative, we'll say, models that were for design as in other ways around it, or just having something unique and cool. I haven't found anything for the Stalker or the Sentinel or the Centipedes. And yeah, so that's one that I definitely would love to get my hands on. That's probably one of my favorite Necron models entirely in the whole collection, but they're a little pricey. So I might start trying to pick some of them up here over time because they're like $90 to $100 a piece. Regardless, out of the Games Workshop Necron Index database, this is the last of the Canoptek units that I will be reviewing before my battle report. And this is probably the coup de grace of the Necron units, in all entirely, not just Canoptek, the Canoptek Reanimator. So for those of you who don't know, in 9th edition, the Canoptek Reanimator came out in the Indominus box set. And it was a very cool looking model with the name Canoptek Reanimator. So to all of our not surprise, we figured it was going to have some type of buff for reanimation. This is one of those units that felt like the entire 9th edition, there was two teams working on the Necron Codex. One who was developing the reanimation protocol rules, and one who was developing other units such as the Canoptek Reanimator. In their mindset for what they looked at, they thought, oh, +1 reanimation will be very, very strong for the entire army and for this unit to be able to give out. However, capping reanimation at no more than a 4-up, which probably was a necessary evil, made reanimators significantly weaker. That, as well as the fact of how their reanimation being timed out. You had to issue a target in your command phase, and it was one target. You could spend 2 command points, as later on in the edition, command points became more and more sparse. It was difficult to actually justify taking the Reanimator, and as well difficult to justify the Reanimator actually making an impact over the course of the game. For 2 reasons. One, the +1 buff to reanimation usually wasn't too much of an effect. There was some units like Scarabs that could really use that +1 buff well, that couldn't usually get an orb or the Orb of Eternity. But for the rest of the army, it wasn't really a strong selling point to bring the Reanimator. And now, though, or it would get destroyed with its low statistics and low body size. Now, a lot of that has stayed the same. The stats on the Reanimator haven't changed that much, aside from one very, very, very important stat buff that it got. And its ability is still to enhance reanimation. However, now it is so much stronger than it ever was before. I would say this guy would be closest to what I would say a auto include for a Necron unit could be. He's comes in at 95 points, and the general impact that he can bring to the overtone of the battle. If your opponent cannot answer the speed of the Reanimator's reanimation effects, here you can nullify entire shooting phases on certain units and things like that. An example is the Lich Guard. The Lich Guard are already very, very, very difficult to bring down. And when you now have the ability to reanimate an additional models every time you do a reanimation effect, it's going to be almost impossible. Your opponent's going to shoot at you and kill one model, and you're going to bring two back. You're going to start adding through subtraction. So let's jump over into Canoptek Reanimator. Let's talk about this guy and what makes him so glorious. As I said, big wrestling fan, this guy is one that definitely went from undesirable to undeniable. So, Canoptek Reanimator. He's got a movement of 7, which, yeah, okay, fine. He's faster than most of the army that you would want to be bringing with him. So that's a good effect that he can keep up with things. Toughness 6 with a 3-up save and only 6 wounds. 7-up leadership, not very much that you're looking to do for this guy for anything if he gets battle shock, so not a big deal there. And he has objective control value 3, which is pretty cool. It's right up there in line with some of the other small vehicles, so he fits that same role of being slightly better than most. Now let's just jump right over to the abilities. Actually, before we get to the abilities, let's talk about what the lesser of it, his gun and his close combat weapon. So for shooting, he has the Atomizer Beamer, which he actually gets 2 of these. So it's 12-inch range, 3 attacks, ballistic skill 4, strength 6, AP 2, 1 damage. So when he shoots, he'll actually have 6 shots because he has 2 of these. Not a bad gun. Not a bad gun for picking up some weaker units that might be trying to scutter in the backfield and take an objective from you, to pick up those guys and make that objective control value 3 matter. The Reanimator Claw. 4 attacks, weapon skill 4, strength 5, AP 0, 1 damage. Once again, this is a Canoptek unit, so the 4-up weapon skill and ballistic skill is a common thing that we see on Canoptek units. In close combat, nothing super impressive here. These are not the reason you're taking him. This is entirely because of his abilities. So let's jump over into that, because this is what we're going to spend the most time talking about with this guy. First of all, the biggest buff that this thing got is a 4-up feel no pain. So 50% of the time when this guy takes damage, you are just going to shrug it off. Combined with a 3-up save and cover being very, very relevant, he has a lot more survivability than you would expect, especially considering he's not a frontline unit. You don't need him to be. And that's where we get into the big one, the big boy ability, what you're spending 95 points on. Nano Scarab Reanimation Beam. First of all, this is an aura. While friendly Necron unit is within 12 inches, not wholly within, of this model, each time that unit's reanimation protocol is active, that unit reanimates an additional D3. Every single time. So if you have a resurrection orb and you do it in your opponent's command phase, boom, an additional D3. If you have, you decide to use the stratagem as soon as you lose guys, boom, additional D3. Every single time that you trigger that, a ghost arc triggering a reanimation, there it is again. You have unlimited abilities to be able to unlimited times that you can trigger this. The only limitation is the phases and in that moment that like the stratagems, the command points, whether the effect triggers. That's it. That's the only thing. But it doesn't matter how many reanimation protocols that you activate, as long as they're within 12 inches, you're going to do additional D3 every single time. Now, initially, and this is a mistake that I made for it, which I'm happy that this is a benefit for it, every time the unit's reanimation protocol is active. So a lot of us look at this like, okay, we get D3 models back. You get additional D3 wounds. Catans. Catans, when they heal, activate reanimation protocols. This only says a Necron's unit. Those are Necron's units. They have the Necron faction keyword. Your monolith. So your monolith can heal an additional D3 every time it reanimates. What else? What other things? Silent King. Anything that is going to trigger a reanimation protocol reanimates an additional D3. Doomsday Arcs, Doomstalker, all of these units, as long as they're within 12 inches, and not even wholly, are going to trigger D3 additional wounds. That is massive, massive, especially considering the fact that our army is built around being tough, being durable, resurrecting, everything like that. Now, and Desolation Marines getting reduced down also into the next statement. This is why I feel he's an auto-include. Desolation reduced down. Artillery is one thing that kind of is the burden of this guy. You can usually, like with his height, for height to terrain, there's usually a lot of spots you can hide him, especially in competitive settings where the first floor blocks line of sight. He can hide real nicely and real easily, and he doesn't need line of sight for the aura. So you can tuck him into the corner where he can't be seen, and the only way he can be seen is dropping into the backfield or artillery. Artillery having -1 to hit and giving you the benefits of cover, you can shrug off a lot of that damage. And then on top of it, the damage that does hit, you have a 4-up feel no pain to get through it. It's much harder to remove the Reanimator. If your opponent does not have the tools to immediately pick him up and remove him, he can be a threat for the duration of the game. And if your opponent cannot remove him, then you're reanimating D3 and your army is just going to stick around forever. So, and I've seen it a lot. A lot of lists that I see pop up, I do see the Reanimator as one of the most common units. Does that mean that this is a unit that potentially could see a nerf? And to be honest with you, yes. I do feel like within the foreseeable future, one unit that is definitely going to see a nerf in Necrons is going to be the Canoptek Reanimator. How bad of a nerf? That's going to be pending with Games Workshop. One thing that competitively, Games Workshop shares a similar ideology that Magic the Gathering Wizards of the Coast share. If something is popping up in every single list, that's when they start to look at it and say, okay, maybe this needs to be toned down so that there's other options to go in there. Now, the Reanimator at only 95 points is kind of a Necron staple just for what we do. So I can't imagine nerfing it too much into oblivion. The biggest thing that I could see, and hopefully it would only be this bad, is reducing the range down to, instead of it being within, to being wholly within, or within 6 inches. One of those two would then make it that the Reanimator has to be more active in the game and allows your opponent the ability to remove it and not sit behind a piece of terrain, controlling and powering all these things. You figure if you're 9 inches from center, or we'll even say if you're 10 inches out of center because of the way that the terrain is set up and the mission you're playing, you have a 12-inch aura. So if you're 10 inches out of center, you're 2 inches past the center. And any objective markers that are there, you can cover and control the middle very, 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 very nicely with a single Reanimator. It's something that I've definitely noticed with Necrons is once that Reanimator is in position, it makes it very difficult to move some of the units that you put in that similar position. So right now at this time, anyone who I know that plays Necrons and they talk to me and they say, hey, what do you think about the Reanimator? I think you're building a 2,000 point army and you're starting at 1905. Why? Because you have a Reanimator. Should you take 2? That one is kind of tough because I feel like when you take 2, you don't have that centralized Reanimator and you're trying to more cover flanks. Now, maybe you don't. Maybe you have one center for defense and one that kind of goes off on the side. And if you have one that goes off on the side to help your army, it runs the risk of being able to be picked off super, super easily. And then those units that are relying on it don't have that buff later into the game, where it might be better to formulate a plan that doesn't consist of the Reanimator on a flank attack. Also, by putting that Reanimator on that flank, you're telegraphing to your opponent the direction you're going to go. And with Necrons typically over some of our units not having the greatest speed, yes, we have Tomb Blades, Scarabs, and things like that, but Warriors and Immortals and Lich Guard are not as fast. So it's going to be a little bit easier to mitigate wall and hold the opponent back and take on other sections of it. With that being said, if that section gets ignored, that Reanimator can then walk into a piece of terrain, hide, and now you have a much wider bubble that you're covering for this reanimation buff. And that could be game breaking. That could be the point where now you are able to just march across the field in a straight line and go, hey, up until this point, you can't take me out. And even things like Necron Warriors that can chain further back, as long as one guy is within 12 inches of that Reanimator, the squad gets the buff. Reanimators to me is an auto include right now. Just how good they are in this at this moment in time. At this date and time stamp when this video goes up, Reanimators are the best, nearest to an auto include that the Necrons have, and probably one of the top of the auto. Like a lot of armies, I don't necessarily think that there is an auto include to every single army per se. Some may argue that right now the Wraith Knight is an Eldar auto include, D cannons, fire prisms, and stuff. But I've seen some mix-ups with that. A little bit over here, a little bit over there. Usually 2 out of 3 of the components for it. The Reanimator is one that it's always there, and it should always be there. It's just that good. And even if your opponent takes it down, it's only 95 points. You still have a lot of game left to go with normal reanimations and being just tough as it is. You're not losing. Yes, you're losing a buff, but it's almost like you're losing a win more buff. The Reanimator stays alive and functions throughout the end of the game. You not only won the game, but you won more. You won in a more, you won in a stronger way. And with that, do you want to do that with a second unit of the Reanimators, having that second Reanimator? Do you want to do that, or do you want to invest on a faster flank that's not going to be tethered to the Reanimator to stay alive? You can still win without the Reanimator, but I feel like it's just such a crucial piece that you need to say, I have this, answer this, or my army's not going to die. And it gets kind of discouraging when you play against an Necron army and go, we're 3 turns deep and I've taken out 7 models. Oh, wait, you're putting them back. Okay, I've taken out none. And it feels great for us. Feels great for us to put all those warriors and everything else back on the table. I'll do it. I'll do it all day long. Love it. So, guys, again, like I said, I got the Canoptek battle report coming out soon. I'm going to get my list up here very soon as well, too, for what I'm taking. And let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Is the Reanimator an auto include? Are we at this point that right now in the edition, not forever, but right now at this moment in time, is that Reanimator just an auto include? He is just way too good to go without? Or is there some penalties that I'm not looking at for having that Reanimator? Right now, I don't feel like there is, other than the fact that you spent 95 points, and they're a little hard to get your hands on unless you already have 2 or 3 of them. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you again soon. I look forward to getting this list on the table.